Folks, I've got a wonderful technique that I'm going to teach you, an easy way to do foundation paper piecing, and we also have a fabulous quilt pattern, Texas on a string, that will go perfect with this technique. So are you ready? Let's get stitching. Well, welcome back to everybody. That's right. My name is Rob Appell from Stitchin Heaven, and I'm super excited to see everybody there on the other side of the camera in their sewing rooms joining me for kind of a learn to quilt video with Rob, but also a super fun pattern we have available here. And I sounded like I designed it, but no, I definitely did not. Our fearless leader, Deb Luttrell, did this, and it's really cool. And at first it looks like a log cabin, but we're gonna break it down different. We're gonna even be able to put in some fun theme fabrics in the center of some of our pieces. And it's a really fun and beginner-friendly pattern. But I'm going to tell you a couple of the things I did today because I thought I knew everything about quilting and dove right in and actually made a couple mistakes. And so it's fun. We're going to use my samples because they're great for learning and teaching. And again, what I really want to teach you is what we're going to do is called foundation piecing, but it's not paper piecing. I don't want to have to take the time to tear out anything when I'm done. So if you look at the back of our blocks, they've all been stitched already on a foundation. Now I'm using a white base fabric because I had it. The pattern calls for muslin. And if you follow some of the instructions or you follow all of the quantities necessary for the pattern, you're going to end up with a 76-inch by 76-inch square. And you'll make 64 of these squares and fill them in according to the pattern. I want to teach you how to do this style of foundation work because it's really simple and easy, and it lends to a lot of other kinds of quilt making and patchwork sewing, including some curved techniques. But again, I like to have a pattern to offer all of you that like to actually use your practice pieces for something incredible. So today we're going to focus on two different block colorations, and I'm calling this side my lights, and I'm calling this side my darks. Now I'm just having fun playing with some bright fabrics. Let's bring this right back in real close here so that you can see what we're referring to in the pattern. These are the lights, and it's a variety. And the more variety you use, so it's very scrap friendly, the more variety of strips that you use, as long as they work nicely together, the better you're going to have interest-wise. Like I said, very scrappy, very fun. And again, I'm going to teach you the basics, but you can also get these really narrow and or do what we call crumb quilting, scrap quilting. I guess that's a mouthful of crumbs. Anyways, so at any rate, we're going to form these block units, and then these star blocks, actually maybe a little differently than you think. So let's get to our sewing. It's fun. It's that time of day. And again, we're going to address both the cool color or the light color blocks, and then our variety blocks or the dark blocks we're making here. And so you're going to need some 8.5-inch pieces. If you're following along, we need 64 of them for this size quilt, right? And then first thing you're going to want to do with all of those is take a ruler, and I'm using my big ruler today because I'm actually going to use it to trim a little bit. In a moment, I'll show you that. So first using a chalk line, and I'm drawing kind of a delicate line down the center here. Okay, so that is the center of the block, but we need to be able to see where we're going to put our two fabrics right sides together. So now I want to go over 1/4 inch. And I'm actually cheating because of the thickness of my chalk pencil. So I told you all I made some mistakes earlier. And what I really did is I didn't set myself up for a great successful part where all of my blocks will come together and have all of the seams match perfectly. Okay, now that looks pretty dang good there, yes, but if I were to rotate this around here, I think you can see that I'm off in a couple of spots. And so one is I got a little too scrappy and I didn't realize that this piece was narrower than all of the rest. The strips in the pattern are 1.5 inches and everything I had cut, but this one snuck into the pile somehow and it was just shy enough that you can see it doesn't read. And that threw this off there, and later on we may want to put a big 2.5-inch chunk here of our theme fabric to bring the whole theme of the design together, the fabrics we're playing off of, the colors we're playing off of together in this unit. And so you're not going to want those seams to be mismatched. The other way that happened, and this is a real good example here, is notice here is my center line on my block. okay? But I'm off because I wasn't using a true 1/4 inch. I was sewing less than a 1/4 of an inch, and on the first few blocks, I actually made kind of thick chalk lines. So those thick chalk lines and my less than 1/4 inch added up to the fact that I wasn't at my center, and that could also be a disadvantage if you like really crisp points that are coming together. Now, the benefit of this style of sewing, folks, is the fabric below, the foundation, gives us the opportunity to keep adding blocks. So you might want to try this in more of a free-form fashion or with different size width units, right? So maybe like 1.5s to 1.25s up to 2s in a variety, keeping the colors the same, maybe not sewing perfectly straight so you're getting these little angles, maybe little bits of curved sewing on top, something like that, but really the angles are the easiest way to get a fun, wonky, offset look that kind of omits the need for any of those points to come together. So anyways, that's the sidebar. Let's get back to construction. Those are all out of my light pile. Now that we have this second line here drawn, oops, I was talking while this is supposed to be a dotted line. So no problem, it's supposed to be a dotted line. So I'm just gonna make myself a few reference marks here. That's gonna all be underneath, right? And then what we would end up doing is if we're building light color blocks, we're going to start with 2 light fabrics in the center here. I've got an example. Now you can see I got started without you a little bit, but let me press this open real quick to show you what I mean with our light colored blocks. So this one here has 2 lights in the center, right? And you know where I'm going with this one. So here's the example of the light and dark blocks. Regardless how you finish the light and dark blocks, whether you're putting in the big strip at the end or the skinny strips at the end, you're still going to want your split between your dark colors and your light colors. Maybe it's your warm colors and your cool colors, something like that, right? But you're going to make an obvious split on some of these blocks, and that's how we form in these awesome star-looking units, okay? So now, setting those, and if you're the accuracy guru, you're going to want to make sure that when you set these, your stitch line goes right along this center line here. So regardless of how you're going to do that, let's just grab real quick a light, and here's a print. This is one of the very lightest from my dark pile. I love to work in gradients, and this is one of my very lightest from my light pile. So now I'm just going to match these up. Those are now right sides together. Unfortunately, these are both print, so it's easy for me to see that. Of course, it'd only be easier if I was working with solids, right? Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure I'm laying this on that dotted line there. And I want to make sure I have plenty of fabric past my corners so that when I press these open, I have all of the piecing where I need it. Now I'm going to carry this over to the sewing machine, and today I don't have an edge guide on, and folks, that was part of my problem. I thought, oh, I'll just use my foot. But my foot is much narrower than a 1/4 inch. There's my 1/4 inch mark there. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and set this, and I'm going to stitch through at least the first 2, now all 3 layers, and I'm going to watch the chalk line and watch the 2 layers of fabric go together, and I'm stitching nice and light, letting the machine do all of the work right here along my center line plus the 1/4 inch. So again, what you're going for if you're following the pattern is that center line would be right on our chalk line, okay? Or running right from corner to corner. So this one is going to work really nicely, all right? That's a good thing. Whew, it's a really good thing. Okay, now the next thing I like to do before I even go to my ironing station over here at the wool mat is what I want to do is I'm just going to trim rough. So my eye's looking at this edge, I'm at least a 1/2 inch and just kind of trimming there. That's going to maximize my scraps. I'm going to return the scraps to their appropriate piles for future use, okay? And then what I will do is I come over to my station and I'm going to press. And right now, I don't believe I can press to the light side because I had my dark side down on the foundation. The foundation is going to make it so that our fabric doesn't get wonky, doesn't move all around, but some of those things we may need to consider. Okay, so if we're now following the instructions for the Texas on a string pattern, we're going to sew on all of our light fabrics. Now let's define, because some of it is often, no, it's almost always relative in quilting, whether it's a light, a medium, or a dark, okay? But so from this pile, these were my blues and my yellows. These were my purples and my fuchsias, a little bit of blue, but so I was just calling this all dark and this all light, hoping for great contrast when we got here. So whether we're talking about the yellow going out to the green or to the blue, this is all considered one of my light blocks. And what we're looking for as we start to sew on our strips is a random variety of layout. So they're not all exactly the same, but they're mostly the same so that when they go in the pattern, they work again together. But that lends to our scrappy feature, okay? So from here, while doing my light blocks, basically started on one side and worked kind of towards the blue was what I was thinking, but of my light pile. And then I rotated and I worked kind of towards the green family on the other side of the blocks, but again, from the light pile. So now we're to one of these dark and light combos, split down the center, and I've gotten again a head start because I don't need to show you how to sew on too many more of these pieces. Half of you have already left the video. Please come back, and you're running to your sewing room to get started because it is this much fun. Okay, so here we go, folks. Let's dive forward. Now I've already again rotated out through the lights, but I want you to notice now I'm using yellow and green and blue on that light side, where again, what I was trying to say on the blocks, I kind of use green on one side and blue on the other, but of all of the light fabric. So now I'm again showing you as much as I can of what I've got going on across here. And now we're just going to grab something else that's now going to basically become a little bit darker as I go through my strip pile. Okay, so I sure like that one next to that. This one also has got some strength, so let's go ahead. That's a print and a solid next to each other. That visual contrast is fun. I'm going to start with my cut end, the scrap end, and because it's a solid, I can basically lay it right here. If you're not comfortable with sewing on the angles, flip it over to confirm you have what you need with your excess, and then come on back over, and now again, we're just going to sew on our 1/4 inch. And I like to start just a little ways in front of what is the foundation block. So through here. And it just becomes a really fun and easy, a little bit of a no-brainer style sewing, cutting off the tail end, returning it to my pile. And what I'm really doing is while I'm over here pressing out my strip, I'm also thinking about, ooh, which one should go next? So I kind of get into a pretty quick rhythm. I had grabbed this one earlier, but now it's time to go ahead and get in here. Oh, look, that's a full strip. I may have mentioned I had several strips of each fabric. So let's use our scraps first. So this was the shorter strip. So let's go ahead and grab that. Just lay it on here again. Right sides together, always right sides together, and then always checking to make sure the foundation piece has not gotten sucked underneath in the machine. Don't want to have to unstitch that. It's there for our advantage, our benefit. Trimming carefully so that you don't hurt yourself, of course. And then I feel like I press maybe 1 or 2 strips and then I realize, okay, fantastic. Now what I want to do is I want to rough trim it down, still plenty away from my edge of my foundation. Okay, building out the block, still perfect like that as we go. Now let's grab another one of these here that's starting to get a little bit darker. That's really dark, okay? Maybe a little darker than we want to go with. Here we go. So I'm going to have the opportunity to put in this one piece. I want you to notice this is a 1 1/2 inch strip. The pattern itself calls for some 2.5-inch strips of the theme fabric. Now those theme fabric blocks, there's actually 4 blocks in the quilt that I'm referring to, Texas on a String. Okay, so as we get into a couple pages within the pattern, you can see there's A, B, C, and D blocks that actually help form this dark theme fabric union that comes together, and or the light theme fabric union that comes together. So these blocks right here, if you aren't paying attention, you might miss. So do slow down a little bit. Let me describe what's happening. On the light side of the fabric, right? So I probably shouldn't even be talking about it right now because I'm on the dark side of the fabric, but I just did this sewing for the video. And again, I feel like I've made every mistake possible. So on the lighter side of the split blocks, you get the opportunity to put in a dark theme fabric, or here in this diagram, this is the one you could miss, you could put in a light theme strip, and again, those are 2.5 inches. So the reason I'm pointing it out right now is you can see a 1.5 inch is going to sit on there nicely. This is where that 2.5-inch strip would fit on there perfect and really introduce a bigger splash of fabric, especially if it's that theme fabric and it brings in all of the colors you've been working with or something like that, right? But to finish out the standard blocks, what we're going to go ahead and do, because you are also making standard blocks, folks. So you have a couple of different ways you're making the blocks once you get into the, we'll call them the split personality blocks, right? So now we're just going to finish this out so I can teach you how to trim it down and show you the design tricks and let you get busy in your own sewing rooms. Okay, so you can see I actually finished it out by adding one last dark strip from where you last saw, but I really want to talk about this little corner that's hanging out there. Let's put a ruler on it. It is barely 1/4 and 1/4. So when the other blocks, and I have a couple of these that show, this one's just a little teeny bit smaller here, I'm not going to be concerned about that. This one, if I am concerned about it, well, I can sew on another piece. I'm probably just going to sew on the same piece of fabric. It's going to make it kind of bulky there, but let's do that so we're doing our best possible sewing in case something goes wrong in the future. It's there for us. We don't want any of that white to show through. That's also why that would have been the perfect one for that 2.5-inch strip, because it would have filled that in nicely. As we're going, it won't be too thick to stitch over or quilt over when we're done, but I do want to repair that. And earlier I was talking about how I had been rough trimming down the block. Well, at this point, the best thing you can do is flip it over, okay? And I want to point out that your foundation may have shrunk in a little bit. Our pattern here, the Texas on a String, calls for 8.5 finish. So now as I lay my 8.5 ruler on here, you can see it's shrunk in by a 1/16, 1/4, so 1/8 of an inch, excuse me, 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to center, I'm going to kind of split the difference, so I'm going to have plenty of foundation in my 1/4 inch seam allowances when I come back to them. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to square up this block. Coming across the top, I accounted for that the same way. And this is why earlier I mentioned I like this larger ruler, because I can cut 3 of the sides very nicely, and it is 8.5 inches wide. Okay, then when I rotate this, now I'm just going to put this outer edge, my non-dominant hand, secure that, trim that down, and now my block is effectively cut perfectly to the 8.5 inches, and we can really start to play with the design. Okay, I'm going to do some rotation, so we're not going to go to the design wall today, so let me just push a little bit more of this stuff out of the way so we can talk about what happens next. If we look at the cover of our pattern, wherever I've been throwing that thing around to, here it is. The center of the actual quilt here itself features 4 of these cool blocks. So let me show you how that would look coming together first off. Okay, so here would be, and I would be focusing on trying to keep similar colors maybe towards the center, but it's going to be fun. And it's going to be kind of scrappy, forming out the center unit you see here. Those light blocks are also used out in the corners and these fill-in sections here and here, okay? Now the stars are actually made so that they sit on point by forming in groups. So now let's just take this and see if I can do this here, where our dark is going to go around like that. So your dark blocks, my dark blocks, are going to kind of Pac-Man in here on that center to form that unit around there. And you can start to see the way that's going to really pop and have that dramatic effect, even though I've added in my own colors to what was a fairly traditionally colored pattern, okay? So you can see how those pieces work. Now, the only other thing to really look for as you're putting yourself on your design wall is your dark block centers. If you are using the theme fabric option, you're going to have those in the, let's call it a checkerboard. Look, dark, light, dark, light. The center, again, has no theme fabric in it. Okay, so then you have another light on the other side of the center. So it's basically darks inside of right here where this starts to form that radiating star here like that. Now here's the last thing, folks, I'll tell you, and then like I said, let you into your sewing room. The cool thing about this, especially if you're doing it in scrappy formation, is you can make it even larger if you would like to. And because it has the foundation, this is a fantastic place to practice your own free motion machine quilting. Because all of the quilt top, even with all of those seams, they're not on the bias and they are also stabilized. So this is going to be somewhere where it's really, really a great place to practice your machine quilting. Use a lightweight batting like a Hobbs 80-20, something like that, and a Sharps needle or your Jeans denim needle is another one of my favorite, or even your universal needle, probably a size 80 or maybe a size 90. And we've got other videos here on our channel that will teach you what those differences mean if you're not already in the know. And again, I hope this is a really fun and exciting, pretty traditional, basic quilt project that's fun for our longtime quilters, but is also very informative and educational for our newbie quilters. We've got a ton of this kind of stuff right here. So what I'd like to know from you at today's video, if you're not already in your sewing room, is what do you think of the foundation project? Would you like to see, I've got 2 more versions I can show you of something very similar. One where we feature some very, very small, very scrappy pieces, and one where we only do half the amount of work. So let me know in the comments below what you would like to see. If you would like to see more of this, make sure you follow the link to pick up a Texas on a string pattern if you would like to follow it exactly to the letter. If not, enjoy the video, enjoy the freedom, enjoy the process. And until I see you next time, folks, please stay well. Oh, and thanks for being here. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.